Hey, Slop Dog! The Brainiacs are ready!
Welcome into LeatherBrainz, your host here, Slap Dog. Today we have a full house. We have a full LeatherBrainz crew here. Gentlemen, the Super Bowl is set.
Yeah.
It is time for the Chiefs to do it again with the 49ers. We are not going to talk about that today, however. We're going to save that for next week. Today we're going to be talking about the games that led to what is now the Super Bowl. So we're going to talk about the Lions and maybe some of the Dan Campbell mishaps that are kind of floating around in the media. We're going to talk about the Ravens and how they choked away a victory. And we're also going to talk about the coaching carousel. So we have what I would deem to be quite a bit to unpack, of course, as we do in most weeks. Let's just go ahead and kick things off with the coaching carousel. Let's talk about the coaches that are on the move, and let's start with the Chargers. Okay, this is big news in the NFL media. Coach Jim Harbaugh, ex-coach for Michigan, they just won the championship. He said, "You know what? I did it once here. I've finally accomplished it in the collegiate level. I need to take my skills back to the NFL." So Jim Harbaugh has been announced as the new head coach for the Chargers. I wasn't necessarily surprised by this. I think mostly it was the color coordination between Michigan to the Chargers that really did it for me. But what do you guys think about Jim Harbaugh to the Chargers?
My initial gut reaction, I think, was just, how does this impact Herbert? Because I think in the NFL, it is most important. I think in college, you can mask not having a very good quarterback with recruiting all over the place. But in the NFL, it's like very apparent that your quarterback is it. And so I think he has that, but I think from a fantasy perspective, as I was looking at it, was like, man, I don't think this is going to be good for his fantasy production at all. Like, I think if you just look at the amount that Harbaugh likes to run it and how he likes to execute and how he likes to play football, like that just doesn't condone itself to Herbert having ungodly numbers. Now, with that being said, I think they will win more games with that style, but that was like my first gut reaction. But also a weird landing spot to go into the AFC West right now. Just if you look at the coaches that they have there and the players they have, and I don't know, it's just it makes sense, but I would have loved to seen him in Chicago personally.
I mean, he used to be way back in the day, he used to be the quarterback for the Chargers. So when he was kind of asked about why the Chargers, he had come out and said, "This does feel like home. There's a homey feel to it. It felt like the right move." Excuse me. It's like
he never even played in that city.
Yeah, that's not even the right city. Felt like
that's true. Same organization.
Feels like home until you're 5 games under 500 too.
Yeah, then it might not be. But to build off of Jim Harbaugh going there, Kellen Moore, he was the offensive coordinator this last year. This was his first year with the Chargers. He has now departed the Chargers after only one season. I started looking into some stats here, and I want to bring this to the table and discuss Kellen Moore just a little bit as far as his success. So I went and pulled up some stats. I looked at the Chargers offense in 2022 when Vince Lombardi was Vince Lombardi.
Yeah. Let's just run with it.
Okay, we'll run with it. When Vince Lombardi was the offensive coordinator, that offense ranked 9th for the Chargers. Okay. Kellen Moore comes in and the offense takes a tremendous downgrade. They go all the way to 18th. And so I said, okay, is it Kellen Moore or is it, Justin Herbert was hurt for a lot of the year. So I want to throw that out there. But I also wanted to look at what did it look like with Kellen Moore as an offensive coordinator with the Cowboys, where he came from. So I looked at the 2022 season when Kellen Moore was the offensive coordinator with the Cowboys. That offense was ranked 11th overall. Pretty damn good, right? Cowboys offense actually with Mike McCarthy as calling the plays it was ranked 5th overall this year. So it was actually better without Kellen Moore. Do we feel like Kellen Moore gets a little too much love given some of the statistics and analytics behind this? Like is Kellen Moore has kind of been touted as like I don't want to say the god of offensive coordinators, but he is definitely a very highly sought after person in the offensive coordinator space. He's now with the Eagles, which is something that the Eagles, they fired their offensive coordinator. They brought in Kellen Moore. They're hoping he can fix it. Should we maybe look at Kellen Moore with a little bit more scrutiny given all these numbers, or what do you guys think? Is he still the right call for the Eagles?
I think the issue with Kellen Moore is what we see with a lot of play callers in the NFL. They go into the game with a good mindset. They know the X's and O's, but they can't make any adjustments once they get hit in the face. Because you look at Kellen Moore's offenses, they look good for the first quarter, maybe even the second quarter. But after that, after the defenses start making adjustments to what they're seeing out there, he doesn't know how to make adjustments. And I think it was evident with a healthy Justin Herbert and Keenan Allen this year.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to think, based on the sample size that we have right now, the Chargers have a real good record of drawing, skilled people into various positions in the organization and then just ruining them. Chargers have done that for my entire life. And so I don't really hold this year against Kellen Moore with all the injuries that they had. Obviously, Austin Eckler took a big step backwards. They lost some receivers. Justin Herbert was out for a period of time. So I still look at Kellen Moore as probably a good addition based on the information that we have with him and all the success that he did have in Dallas. And so I think it's a step in the right direction for an Eagles team that desperately needs offensive help.
Yeah, I think you can look at this a few different ways. The one thing that stands out to me is that you're going to have quarterback injuries. You're going to have injuries on your team. And I think for me, the top tier, the top echelon offensive coordinators can still cook with whatever ingredients they have. They make something work. You always see how are they still producing? How are they still able to put up points? You may have to do it a different way, but I agree with Yeti on the inability to adjust. I think you see that with a lot of teams. I think it's kind of like the Mike McDaniel syndrome too, where he can game plan up into the game and he can scheme you up something right away. But then once halftime hits or the second quarter goes and you see the team make an adjustment, like there is no adjustment made. And I watched quite a few Chargers games this year and spot on. That's how it was. Like they had a good plan and then it deviated or there was no backups or there was no adjustments being had. But I think he's an upgrade for the Eagles. So I'd be okay with it. But I think it just comes with time. He's still young. I think that's something where as he gets older, he will learn how to do that. I think he's good at scheming him up, but I think it's kind of I don't think he's the top echelon, but I think he certainly has the tools to do it.
Okay. Him going to Philly is kind of interesting because Nick Sirianni is calling the shots there in Philly. So I know Nick Sirianni is on the hot seat and he knows that he probably has to give up play calling, but is he really going to be giving up the play calling to Kellen Moore? Like, I'm curious to see how that dynamic unfolds because Sirianni took it over after Steichen left to go to the Colts this past offseason. So
desperate coaches will do desperate things. And if they get off the rails early, like if they're not on track early in Philadelphia, that'll be super interesting to see how that dynamic plays out with him and Kellen Moore. Because you could almost see like he takes it over or he's demoted or he does some crazy thing because Sirianni's ass is on the line. Like if you're about to get fired, like you're going to do whatever you can to like fix it or take control of it. Like that's just a natural reaction. So yeah, that is going to be super interesting.
It is. And it's one that like you talk about the ability to adjust. I look at it like an offensive coordinator and a defensive coordinator. You have to work with the tools that you have. And I am interested to see how that correlates because this is really the first time that Kellen Moore, since being an offensive coordinator, has had such a mobile quarterback. Like Dak Prescott, he can kind of run. I mean, he's no Jalen Hurts or Lamar Jackson as far as being able to move with his legs. And so that was something that I think Shane Steichen really unlocked with the Eagles that we really saw take a step back this last year is the ability to move kind of like Patrick Mahomes, where Patrick Mahomes won't run unless he needs to, but what he does is extend plays with his legs. And I feel like we just didn't see that Jalen Hurts this year. So I'm interested to see, do we get more back into that style of offense? Because it appeared early in the year that the Eagles really wanted to try and establish a running game, and then they kind of just went away from that, is my impression anyway. And so what does Kellen Moore do here? Because he's played with Dak, he's played with Dallas offense, he's played with the toys there, and then he goes over to the Chargers and we saw Austin Eckler kind of take a step back too. Is that because of the play calling? Is that because of Austin Eckler declining in ability? Maybe a mix of both. I don't know. So it is going to be interesting. I don't hate the move. I think that obviously the Eagles had to do something, and Kellen Moore is a pretty sought after offensive coordinator. I don't know if I'm going to hold my breath though. To be honest, I don't know where the Eagles. I don't know if he's the right answer for the Eagles. Unfortunately, I think there's some other people that I would prefer to go over to the Eagles to make it as high powered as what the Eagles expect it to be.
Well, and it could very well be a moot point because we know that the Eagles' primary issue, obviously they had their offensive woes, but their defense was pitiful. So they've got to do all sorts of stuff on that side of the ball as well. And maybe they will with the new hire, but they've really got to focus on that because Kellen Moore can be as efficient as they come. If their defense can't stop anybody, it's not going to matter.
Well, let's talk about it. The Eagles went and got defensive coordinator Vic Fangio. He was the former Dolphins defensive coordinator. And you want to talk about woes from a defensive perspective, I think the Dolphins really faced a lot of that this entire year. Their defense was a huge problem. Is Vic Fangio the answer? Is Vic Fangio the guy to come in and clean up that defense that the Eagles so desperately need? What do you guys think?
I liked Vic Fangio before last year. I think when we were going into the season, that was one of the things that I thought would help propel Miami. They also dealt with some injuries, which I think kind of hurt them a little bit. And I don't think they played very good complementary football at all. Like McDaniels had his way of doing it. And I think that's where you can see a divide. And I think some of the Miami players saw it too, where everybody's looking for complementary football. You want your offense and defense to kind of work off each other. Like if you have this offense that just wants to push and fly and throw. And they had that with Tyreek. But what you saw when it didn't work is 3 and out. Maybe you get a first down. Maybe it's a quick turnover, whatever it happens to be. Now your defense is back out there. And I don't think Vic Fangio was a fan of that style, reading a lot of the reports that were coming out of his exit. And I think this is a good move for the Eagles. I think because they do like to play that complementary style of football. I think the Eagles like that ball control. I think Kellen Moore, hopefully he introduces a little bit more variety to kind of keep them on schedule. That Eagles team, though, is just going to – they have a lot of pieces that they're going to have to work through free agent-wise. And, they have some pieces on the offensive line they might have to correct if, like Jason Kelsey retires, which a lot of people think he will. And then they're going to have some holes. Like, what do you do? And
yeah.
So I think it's good. I think they have a good base. I think that defensive line would make me want to go be D coordinator there in a hurry because that D line is sexy. The back end, not so great, but I think it's just you kind of got to get out of that situation in Miami. So I think both the coordinators they got are definite upgrades from what they had.
Yeah. Speaking of upgrades, I don't know what the Steelers are doing here, but they did interview Arthur Smith, former head coach for the Falcons. The Steelers interviewed him for their offensive coordinator position, which some may consider smart since he does favor backup running backs. So for anybody that owns Jaylen Warren, could be happy about that. I didn't think Arthur Smith would ever see an offensive coordinator position ever again, given the disarray that was the Falcons organization. Shocking. Do you guys care? Should we move on? Is there anything to touch on here?
Honestly, this was a perfect landing spot because I'm not going to target anybody from the Steelers offense to begin with. So I mean, if he lands there, great. Like that's even more reason to be like, all right, now as you done Deontay Johnson, you're done. I don't want no parts of that.
Yeah,
well,
I think what really happened is they looked at the Falcons situation and they gave Arthur Smith a big old pass because of Desmond Ridder. That front office didn't give him a quarterback, and so he wasn't able to utilize his weapons, and they said, it's not his fault, so we're going to go ahead and give him an interview.
Here's Mitchell Trubisky.
Yeah, give him interviews all you want, but I feel bad for Steelers fans if that's actually what happens here.
Okay, so here's the spin zone to that. Arthur actually did the Falcons a favor by not using Robinson a ton. So now he doesn't have as many miles on him for the next coach. So that's actually like A+ coaching that he was looking out for the next coach. He's like, hey, I'm not going to get him hurt. I'm not going to use him a lot because I know the next coach is going to come in here. So I think that makes a ton of that's perfect. Like he's looking out
now
for
that
the
you
next
said
guy.
that, I actually like Arthur Smith. He's
I
a
don't.
great guy. Yeah.
Because now this next coach gets to use Jean as much as he wants.
Well, I think it was unintentional. I don't think Arthur Smith did
Planned.
it with intention. I think he's just so stupid that's how it kind of panned out.
That mustache was playing 4D chess all over us.
that was the real brains of the operation, was that mustache. Well, Arthur Smith is no longer with the Falcons, and the Falcons went and hired the Rams defensive coordinator Raheem Morris, which I'm a big fan of this hire. I think Raheem Morris has done a great job with the Rams defense, and the Falcons do have a very good defense as far as their personnel. So I think this is a really, really exciting hire to help continue to bolster that Falcons defense. But What I really want to talk about with the Falcons is Bill Belichick. He interviewed with the Falcons twice and was seen as the leading candidate. What gives here, fellas? What happened with old Billy and Belichick, and your guys' thoughts and opinions?
He cost too much money.
No, I don't think that was it at all. I know in the background, Atlanta kind of changed their ownership structure. Like obviously they have the owner they have, but there was just some power changes that happened within that org. And I don't think that quite suited Bill. I don't think this is an instance where it's like the carousel Bill was left off. Like, I don't think that was it at all. Like, he can afford to be picky, but you also have to remember he came from a situation where he had a metric F ton of control over how the team looked and ran. And I don't think Atlanta was willing to give them that. And I don't think they were willing to sacrifice, how much longer is Bill going to coach? Like, is this a 2 to 3 year thing where he's going to run us into the ground if we don't like what he does? Or are we sacrificing too much with what kind of some of the changes we just made in our own front office? And I think for them, it was more of just like probably not the right time for us to do that. I do think it'll be interesting, and I for us to keep like a short list of teams that as they kind of decline going into next year, like who starts tumbling down. You've heard whispers of coaches that have been in their spots for quite some time that may be hanging them up. And do they look at Bill to try to be like a Band-Aid fix for the org, moving forward? But I don't think I think this just had more to do with just probably not a right fit for the both of them at this point.
So there's starting to be some rumblings now that Bill's might be getting into some media, especially if he doesn't end up landing a job, obviously, this year. And I just think that would be so weird. Like, can you imagine Bill Belichick on TV
I don't like that.
commentating? Like, I feel like it's ruining the illusion of Bill Belichick that he speaks 10 words a year and they're all genius words. And if he's up there commentating on games, it's really going to ruin it.
Could you imagine him and Gronk doing a game together?
Oh my God.
Sweet God.
That would be awful. Oh,
Jesus. I want to get Bill's. The only thing I'd want Bill is like on one of those like first take type shows to get on there when they're talking about who's the greatest of all time quarterback and just hear what he actually has to say. He's not part of the Patriots anymore. He doesn't have Tom Brady anymore. He doesn't have to worry about it. What does he actually want to say? That's the only thing I'd want to hear. Like, is he kind of like, fuck you, Tom? Like, I made bitch.
He comes out and says, yeah, Cam Newton. Cam Newton, hands down.
Best quarterback I ever worked with. Didn't work out for the organization, but I loved having him on the team.
Or he says something left field like, everybody's mismanaging Jimmy Garoppolo.
Well,
that's what I want to see.
Super Bowl Jimmy.
Yeah, I don't think you're going to hear that from old Billiam. Panthers, they hired the Bucs offensive coordinator, Dave Canales. What do we think about that? I think the Panthers are hoping that he'll bring Baker back to that organization for the second time. I don't think there's much saving for the Panthers organization. I think that's going to be a pretty tough spot, at least for the next 2 to 3 years before they can get some draft capital and get some pieces to try and compete. I think that any person taking that job is kind of, you have to go in with that mentality that you're not going to succeed right away, but what can we do to try and build something here? So I don't hate that hire. He's a young guy. He's obviously shown that he can, from an offensive perspective, he unlocked Baker Mayfield and a lot of teams really couldn't. So I think maybe that gave the Panthers a little bit of hope, and maybe he could do the same for Bryce Young. Are you guys good with that hire? Or do you kind of wish they would have pivoted in a different direction?
I'm generally in favor of teams in this position hiring offensive-minded guys to be the head coach because, as they hopefully grow into a more successful franchise down the line, the last thing you want is to have a defensive head coach or a CEO type head coach who doesn't call plays, and you finally get success and then your offensive coordinator gets poached, which is what happens with every team in the NFL all year long. So when you're starting from the ground up, hiring an offensive guy I think is the right move, just generally speaking.
I think if you're a Panthers fan, the only like solace in this, if you're wondering, because he is young, right? Like he doesn't have like an extremely like long track record, but he was with Seattle propping up Russell Wilson as the QB coach and kind of passing game coordinator. So if you want to say like, hey, look what he did for that, if you don't believe in Russ, then that's it. That's probably like a little glimmer of hope for your offense where you're like, man, maybe this guy could unlock it. But I mean, he was under Pete Carroll. He obviously knows a lot how that's ran. I think if he can port some of that into the Panthers system, it could be positive. But it's just, can he do that with Bryce Young? That's really what it's going to come down to.
I don't even think it's Bryce Young. I think it's, can he do it with Bryce Young plus a bunch of retired athletes that have come out to play for the Panthers organization, because that's kind of what that roster is made up of at the current juncture. So it's going to be interesting. I don't, like I said, I don't expect the Panthers to do much in the short term, but as a long-term hire, I don't mind it.
Hey, he helped unlock Geno Smith. So there you go.
And Baker.
And thankfully, the Panthers are in the NFC South. So, I mean, there's really not that much competition.
Yeah. You're like, there isn't much competition here, I guess.
So many exhibition games.
We'll kind of play with the mentality of fuck around and find out. Speaking of finding out, there is 2 vacancies left for the head coaching position in which we have not found out who the head coach will be yet. So those 2 teams are both Commanders and the Seahawks, with Pete Carroll out, and Riverboat Ron has parted ways from the Commanders. So I just wanted to touch on the Commanders very quickly here. Eric Bieniemy is someone that was kind of floated around as a name last year as a potential head coach in a couple different places, and then ended up as the offensive coordinator for the Commanders, which left a lot of people scratching their heads. He was the offensive coordinator for the Chiefs. He was winning. They were doing very well. Why would Eric Bieniemy leave to go to the Commanders in what a lot of people deemed as a lateral move? Most people kind of thought that it was with the intentions of, if Riverboat Ron left, Eric Bieniemy would take over as the head coach. That was being touted around in the NFL media. Riverboat Ron has left, and yet Eric Bieniemy's name really has not been floating around in any of the head coaching vacancies this offseason. Any thoughts or opinions as to why that might be?
I mean, I can give one. No, I can give just one. It just doesn't make sense to me. I feel like, now I know in Kansas City there was some butting of heads between him and Mahomes that were kind of quietly shared amongst some of the media members of like, it's just not quite working out. But like, he just has to suck at interviewing. Like, he just has to show up with either like shit all over himself, or he just threw up and it's just all over his shirt. He didn't clean it up, or like he just has cocaine just like sprinkled around his nose or something. He like didn't clean it off. Like, that's really the only reason, because he deserves at least a head coaching, like, just give him a shot. Like, I think he knows what he's doing. I don't know why you wouldn't just give him a shot. And I don't know if it's also part of the coaching trees. Like, if it doesn't work out with some, I think some GMs are hesitant with other coaches. If you look at Matt Nagy is a perfect example off that Reed coaching tree, where he tried to go and it was just a fucking terrible experience. So like, am I going to do that too? I don't know. I do think it's weird, but what do I know?
And no disrespect to Dave Canales from Tampa Bay, but in my opinion, Eric Bieniemy should be getting an interview over Dave Callis, from just what we've seen from Eric Bieniemy's history with Kansas City, and then obviously this past season with Washington. I think he did a lot more with Washington than Dave Canales did with Tampa Bay this past offseason, with the limited weapons that he had there in Washington.
Yeah, and we haven't heard any rumblings about him getting an interview with the Panthers, but we said it a while back that, when everything was still up in the air, we didn't know who anyone or where anyone was going. If I was Eric Bieniemy, I don't want to go to the Panthers. The Panthers is the worst landing spot of all the vacancies at that time, and it's not out of the realm of possibility for me that they called him and he said no thanks. Like, I'd rather stay here in my current position or find a new offensive coordinator position than derail my career from starting out with the Panthers, who aren't going to have success for 5 more years minimum.
Well, and that's a really valid point. I mean, Kellen Moore was a name that David Tepper, he's the owner of the Panthers. He said he wanted to bring someone like Kellen Moore over to help, restart and reinvigorate this offense. And Kellen Moore came out to the media and said, not much gets me excited about going to the Panthers. So maybe, as far, at least at the Panthers organization, maybe that's why Dave Canales went there, is because that was the only vacancy where he would have a shot to go be a head coach. And you think about it, like, a lot of people in either an offensive or defensive coordinator positions, like, that's the dream, is to become a head coach, right? That's why you want to do this. But also you want to succeed. And do you want to go to a place where that you're already starting off on a bad foot because it's just such a disorganized franchise, and there's name value involved with that. Oh, that's Dave Canales. He's he doesn't know what he's doing. So he's a young guy. Maybe it was one of the only opportunities he could have to try and show that he could do it, versus somebody like Eric Bieniemy. That's probably a little bit riskier for him, because if he goes to the Panthers and they do fail, what does the rest of his trajectory of his career look like? So But I do think the Panthers should have went and at the very least tried to get an interview with him, because I think from an offensive perspective, where the Panthers really desperately need some help, he would be one of the guys that I would want to come in and try and clean that up.
Yeah, and I mean, an interesting thing is the narrative now is that the Commanders are looking to hire Ben Johnson. I've heard some conflicting reports about that. Obviously, nothing's set in stone. Some places are saying it's a done deal already, and other places are showing more skepticism there. But with that's the case, you got to assume that Eric Bieniemy's not going to stay in Washington, right? If they hire Ben Johnson to be the head coach.
Come back to Kansas City.
Yeah, please,
I don't know,
please
man.
God.
I don't know, because they need to find a head coach, right? And it's going to be interesting. I don't know. I have seen Ben Johnson. He's the offensive coordinator for the Lions. His name has been toted around, and I've seen that floating, and I've seen, kind of like you mentioned, Scotty, conflicting reports. I don't know. I think that's probably just good. I would see him probably leaving. But once again, that could be like let's have a conversation and see if both of us mentally we're on the same page and we want to kind of try and do this thing. So I'm interested to see how that pans out. But Eric Bieniemy hasn't even, the Commanders have not given him a head coaching interview. So maybe he doesn't want it, or maybe they don't believe he's the right guy. But still interesting, regardless. Yeah. Speaking of interesting, let's move things over to a Chiefs victory. The Chiefs were underdogs in this game here against the Ravens, and they ended up winning it 17-10. The Chiefs advanced to their 4th Super Bowl in 5 seasons. I want to start out with this question, and then I'll let you guys kind of run with it. Patrick Mahomes is the greatest quarterback to play this game. Yes? I mean, I don't think a lot of people are going to say, I've seen, this is the whole LeBron versus
it's a LeBron Jordan debate.
Thank you. I don't think it is. I think Patrick Mahomes is the best quarterback that has ever played in the NFL. I think his trajectory is only going to continue to show that. But I think he is an ultra competitor. And I think if this year is any indication of, I think this year is the perfect indication of that, because both of Alan and Scotty, you being Chiefs fans, have even said, this is a lackluster team. This team is not good enough to make it to the Super Bowl. This team doesn't have what it takes. We've repeatedly had this conversation throughout the season of, this team is not a Super Bowl contending team, and here they are in the Super Bowl, and I do believe that is because of Patrick Mahomes. I'm not a Chiefs fan, and I have repeatedly said this entire year, Patrick Mahomes probably always deserves a spot as an MVP candidate, and he didn't make it this year. I think this year he should have made it probably more than the year that he won it, because he's doing more with less. So I think he's the greatest quarterback to ever play in the game, and I'm sure you as Chiefs fans probably also agree with that.
I think, obviously he's on the trajectory to be that, but you look at Tom Brady's career, and he had very similar situations to what Patrick Mahomes has this year, which is not a lot of offensive weapons. He kind of builds guys up that were seen as role players and makes them into superstars, and they win championships with good defense, and that's what we're seeing with the Chiefs this season. So Patrick Mahomes is certainly on the right trajectory, but I'm not going to argue with you if you say, well, Tom Brady's got way more championships as of right now.
Yeah, I think that's what the LeBron Jordan debate is like, people look at Jordan as like, look how successful he was. Like, you can't deny what he did for his team. He made people better. He did more sometimes with less. He had help when, and he didn't have to score all the time, and he did in the beginning. I think there's a lot of comparisons. I think for me, Mahomes is on that trajectory, which is wild to me. I never thought as a Chiefs fan that we would be at a point where we're like the most hated team in the NFL. Nobody wants to see us on TV. Because I remember I went to the 2019 AFC title game against Tom Brady, and going there, it was like, please beat Tom Brady. We can't stand to see another Patriots Super Bowl. Please beat them. And then it was like, obviously they didn't win that game, but it's interesting now to be, a few years down the line, and you're like, it's the complete opposite. I think for me, and I heard it on TV today, it's like Mahomes is now in the realm of ruining legacy games and careers for a lot of these people. The list of playoff wins that Mahomes has currently right now by quarterbacks, and I'll run down the list really quick of just like guys he's ended, just the season for. Andrew Luck, Deshaun Watson, Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, Ben Roethlisberger, Trevor Lawrence, Tua, Ryan Tannehill, Baker Mayfield, Jalen Hurts, and then Jimmy Garoppolo. The last two obviously were in the Super Bowl. And then you just look at what happened this year. I think for me, it was just an emphasis on they had to play complementary football. They have an amazing defense. Pat can't rely on his wide receivers all the time. You can see he's not taking the shots he used to, and he's kind of getting, a little bit of backlash in the second half of that game. They're like, oh, well, they didn't do anything. Listen to the interviews of the offense. They knew, hey, they're not doing anything. We got them. We have to just control the ball. Don't turn the ball over. Be smart with it, and we can come out of this thing with a victory. And I think the other impressive thing out of that game, which I don't know if has been reported, but the Chiefs wide receivers recorded 0 drop passes. Their first of the season.
I want to jump off of that because we're talking about how awesome Patrick Mahomes is. And one thing that stood out to me that hasn't really been a headline or a major talking point with the Chiefs this season, but people have mentioned it throughout the course of the season, is that Mahomes, obviously in the height of the dropped pass issue and losing games that we shouldn't lose, he had a million opportunities to criticize his receivers and throw them under the bus and say, well, I did everything I could do, and it just didn't work out. And he never once did that. But now finishing the season, he's had the support of his pass catchers. Finishing the season, people like MVS are catching game-sealing balls. And Travis Kelce went from dropping a bunch of passes to catching 11 straight in a row. And you just have to wonder if Mahomes' leadership and supporting his guys, and you even get this when you listen to the Kelce podcast where, I would throw Kadarius Toney off a cliff, but Travis Kelce supports him unquestionably. So, well, he's a Chief. He's got the ability to make the plays. And I think just that confidence that they can instill in their guys when they make mistakes and say, hey, get back up. You're here for a reason. I think that leadership from people like Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce and probably Andy Reid is a big reason why they are where they are right now. They've been able to pull it together because nobody's turning on each other. The locker room remained united through good times and bad times this season.
Yeah, but is somebody like Mahomes not also the villain alongside with Travis Kelce? There was a clip that came out of both of them harassing Justin Tucker and throwing the Ravens kicker's helmet as well as the balls that he was using to kick with. They kind of threw him out of the way and they said, "Get out of here." Are you not a villain? I mean, you're painting him out to be a hero. Someone call him a villain.
Well, no matter how much of a villain he is, he'll always be my hero, first of all. But second of all, I saw that clip and thought it was hilarious. And I didn't really know what had happened. The clip is 2 seconds long, so you don't really know what the context was. But Pat McAfee, who, by the way, is also a kicker, not a place kicker, but in the kicker category, came out and said Justin Tucker was the instigator there. The kickers are supposed to get out of the way of the star quarterbacks that bring in all the money and all the fans into this league. And yeah, Justin Tucker's awesome and maybe one of the best kickers ever. But at the end of the day, when you got a ball teed up on the goal line and you're not even kicking, you're just over there stretching, and Patrick Mahomes is trying to warm up, just move out of his way. Not that big of a deal. And I didn't say that. Pat McAfee said that.
I'm going to say this. We're a pro kickers podcast, just not in fantasy football. No. Dick-headed move. That was a villainous move. Kickers gonna kick. That is what we have said all season. You don't treat a kicker like that. Especially Justin Tucker. He is the kicker of all kickers.
And Justin Tucker had came out after the game and he had said, he's like, I don't know why I really need to address this, but he said, I've been doing this all season. He said, I thought Mahomes and Kelce were just kind of fucking with me, but then they kind of just took it pretty serious. He was like, I just need to warm up like the other guys do. So this is what I've done all season, but it
sounds like villains.
It's stupid.
Sounds
shit.
like someone called them villains. No,
he was trolling.
Pat McAfee settled it.
He was
I defer to him.
Who's practicing their 1 yard?
He's not a kicker. He's a punter.
How many kicks have you done from the 1 yard line? Yeah. 0. Get out of here.
And you're really supporting the kicker for someone who loves Dan Campbell. He obviously hates his kicker.
Well, there might be reasons that we might get into as to why he doesn't love his kicker. And I also did say previously that Justin Tucker was the best kicker in the NFL. So there is a difference there between the Lions kicker and Justin Tucker.
Well, and he only is the best kicker in the NFL because Mason Crosby decided to not be able to stay on
none
the
of
team.
us are going to argue that.
He's
Mason Crosby is the best kicker the NFL has ever seen. Some would call him the
The
giver.
goat.
The goat, the giver. All
I'm
the
gonna be
above.
honest. I don't have a lot to really. You guys can take this and run with it. This whole Chiefs thing. I'm not a Chiefs fan. This is your guys' moment to shine. I don't want to tarnish that. Say what you guys want about the Chiefs. You guys. You have the floor.
Yeti, would you like to say anything good about the Chiefs?
I will say, you know, I am a Raiders fan, and I understand that I'm supposed to hate the Chiefs, but I am a football fan. I'll just say that. I love the Raiders. I will, you know, root for the Raiders through and thick and through, whatever. But as a football fan, it is fun to see Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid do what they've been doing, because it's not like they have the first 2 seasons they had Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce, one of the best offenses. But Andy Reid, he has come a long way from his days in Philly. He's had to adjust so much to what the NFL has done, and he's had to turn, you know, a star-powered offense into a lackluster offense. Really, is what that offense kind of looked like this year. And now they're in the Super Bowl. But he's also done this with his defense. He beefed up his defense, which is something that he had with Philly when he was there for a stint. But I just have to give a lot of kudos to Andy Reid and his coaching staff for having his guys prepared.
I would agree. I think you saw. I think the things that we were clamoring for, and where we were like week 10 in this season with this Chiefs team, where they were fumbling and stumbling and just kind of rolling through, that, you know, the Raiders got them on Christmas, right? Like you're all through that point, and they looked super beatable. Like they, you know, like we were worried, are they going to lose to Miami? No, they didn't lose to Miami. And then the narrative was, well, it was too cold. Well, Buffalo's going to do it. Josh Allen's totally going to do it. Oh no, just kidding. They have too many injuries. And then it was, no, okay, Baltimore's the best team they've seen all year. Like they're going to lose in Baltimore. And then it was, oh, the refs. Oh, they choked. Like, at what point does it start becoming, it can't just be happenstance that all these things just happen around this Chiefs team, this current team right now. Like, I think
You
they
ever
put
heard
it
of the
together.
script?
Yeah. That is for smooth-brained idiots that want to troll on Twitter that can't handle the reality of the situation going on in their lives. But what I think happened is, you look at who got the majority of the receptions for the Chiefs yesterday. There's 2 guys. It was Travis Kelce, Rashee Rice. Who got the carries? It was either Pacheco or Mahomes was scrambling. That was it.
I think Clyde touched the ball once or twice.
He did, but you know, he famously doesn't.
He touched it. He didn't do much with it, but he did touch the ball.
Those 4 guys touched the ball. That was it. That's all they were giving it to. And yes, MVS came up big at the end, and yes, they did all this stuff where but they boiled it down to the guys that they know they could count on. And that's what I think all of us were saying. Tony popping off on Instagram live talking about how the Chiefs were lying about his injury. What's funny is, if you hate the Chiefs, now all of a sudden you're going to believe Kadarius Toney. Like, oh, now Kadarius Toney is being truthful and honest, and he's smart.
Yeah, no one should ever trust Kadarius Toney ever, first of all. And second of all, Kadarius Toney is such a fucking idiot. Like, the only reason he is still on the injury list, because we all know that the Chiefs aren't going to play him. Like, after all the bullshit that he cost us, the Chiefs are not going to play him. And I see it as the Chiefs are like, well, you know, maybe you're not 100% healthy. We'll leave you on the injury list. That way, when we inevitably get rid of you next season, maybe somebody will give you the benefit of the doubt and pick you up. The Chiefs are trying to help him out by giving a reason why he's not in the game, rather than just, you fucking suck at playing football. And he still just complains about it. He's just butthurt. He's terrible. Again, throw him off a cliff.
I'm fine with throwing him off a cliff. I think he probably threw himself off a cliff, though, if I'm being honest. Like, you screwed yourself. I mean, that's what you really did. You screwed yourself at a future opportunity, because the Giants got rid of Kadarius Toney because he is a problem. And he, not only was he constantly hurt, whether he claims he's not, Giants claim that he was. Regardless, he wasn't on the field and he wasn't producing. So they traded him away. They sent him off to the Chiefs. And the same thing happened with the Chiefs. And if you were smart, you would shut the hell up and just say, yeah, I'm hurt. I'm not able to play. So you could try and go to another team and maybe have an opportunity. But now you've ostracized yourself and said, hey, I'm not hurt. They're liars. And then the team, what team is going to be like, that's the guy we need on our roster. That's the guy that's going to be a difference maker. Is the guy who can't catch a ball while we're trying to maybe cover up some stuff, whether you are injured or not. you're going completely against what we as an organization have come out and said. So you're a problem. Probably time for Kadarius Toney to go, and I think he probably also hurt his chances of any other future endeavors with his career in the NFL.
Yeah, if anyone was willing to take a risk on him, which would have been very stupid anyway. Those teams are few and far between.
For anybody who is not watching us live and is listening to the podcast,
shit.
Can't Stop, Won't Stop, a great Brainiac.
I love that dude so much.
He said, Alan, we fighting, LOL. So that was a graphic that just came up on the screen. You guys can fight after the show. We still got to keep going with this thing.
Nothing but love.
Yeah. I don't, like I said, I really don't have much here. I think if anything, this Chiefs game taught us what I knew deep down, and it's hard for me to confront, to be honest with you. I am starting to be a Chiefs hater. I'm not because I hate the Chiefs. I like Patrick Mahomes and I like Andy Reid. I'm just tired of the success.
Breaking news. Hunter doesn't like the Chiefs. Yeah, it's not like we haven't known that for 10 years.
You know what? I freaking get it, because we all sat there and watched the Patriots do this to us every year. I freaking understand. And I said this to Christy, my wife, yesterday or Sunday when we were watching the game. I was like, I understand if people hate the Chiefs. Like, I totally get it. Like, and Scotty, I don't think you understand. Like, we are so spoiled with this shit.
Oh,
like,
I get it.
We are
Patrick Mahomes has won more playoff games in his short tenure than the Chiefs had won in their franchise history.
Patrick Mahomes in year 6 has already played a full season of NFL games just in the playoffs.
Yeah.
He literally has played a full season.
Yeah, and in those 17 games, he's thrown for 5,000 yards and 32 touchdowns and 3 interceptions.
We were on vacation and they were playing the Bills. I didn't even get to watch the game. And Chrissy's like, "Are you sure you're okay with that?" I'm like, "Yeah, like they're probably not going to win." Like,
it's not a big deal.
I was like,
we're going to win.
No. I was like, you know what? We're in Buffalo. Don't deserve to win that. Like, this is all set up for Buffalo to win it. Like, I will be shocked if we come out with it. And checked every now and again. Oh, wow, it's close. Oh, wow, it's close. And they ended up winning it. I'm like, what? I don't deserve. Like, what the hell do I do? Like, I don't deserve this. Like, this is unreal. I get it. They're always on TV, the Taylor Swift, whatever. Like, I get it if people hate the Chiefs. I totally get it. It makes sense to me because I had to witness
it. The
Swift
thing is ancillary. Like, that is a conversation in and of itself. I respect the hell out of Patrick Mahomes. I do think I said at the very beginning of this thing, like, Patrick Mahomes is the best quarterback to ever play in the NFL. And I do believe that. And I also think Andy Reid is a top 5 NFL coach. So to get to watch them, it's cool because I recognize that I am watching history in a lot of ways. Like, I'm watching something that you don't get to see that often. We saw it happen with the Patriots with Tom Brady, and now we're seeing it happen. The same thing happen with the Chiefs. And it's cool. It's cool to watch that. I'm happy for Chiefs fans. I'm happy for my friends that are Chiefs fans, but I'm also I want to see something new. I want to see something different. I want to see someone else get their shot. And what'd you say, Eddie?
Then beat them.
No, and that's the problem is you can't. The teams can't beat them. And we are constantly seeing that. I mean, we look at it like, Scotty, if we were to pull up here the postseason predictions in which we have sat here and constantly tried to, every week in the postseason we were guessing games, right? And you kept saying Chiefs because I'm a Chiefs fan, and you and Alan both have said, I don't think we have the roster to make it all the way. I mean, that is what has come out of both of your mouths. But it doesn't matter because while the Ravens might have a better roster, and I do think the Ravens have a better roster on paper, it doesn't matter because you have Patrick Mahomes and he has come in and he has done something that arguably no other quarterback besides Tom Brady has been able to do with this much success. So the fact of the matter is you can't beat him.
And I'm enjoying this Chief circle jerk a lot, believe me. But the last point I'll make before we move on is Patrick Mahomes, of course, deserves a ton of praise because of the success that he's had over the course of his career. But we cannot forget about this Chiefs defense because they have been the saving grace all season long. Patrick Mahomes, he only had to play 2 quarters against the Ravens because the Chiefs defense did everything else. The Chiefs offense did absolutely nothing in the second half, whether that's in part by design or maybe by the Ravens making adjustments, whatever it might be. The Chiefs offense was completely dead in the second half, and it is what it is. And the Chiefs defense kept them in the game. Spags is a freaking rock star. That guy adjusted against Miami. He adjusted against Buffalo. Just contrast the Buffalo game versus the Ravens game. We forced Josh Allen we forced the Bills to run the ball because we didn't want Josh Allen throwing 70-yard bombs on us all day. Then we forced Lamar Jackson to throw the ball. And those are the two things we needed to do to stymie those offenses to a degree. Spags was able to do that, and this defensive unit, as young as they are, and as much progress as they've made since last season, is just incredible. And I think this season alone is on par with the greatness of Patrick Mahomes, and they are the reason why the Chiefs are in the spot that they're in right now.
Well, I think Ravens fans would argue that Lamar choking would be the reason that the Chiefs are in the position that they are right now. Ravens, they were one of the best rushing teams this year. KC struggled against the run all year long, and then Baltimore handed the ball to their running backs a total of 6 times for 23 yards. I mean, that to me is pretty indicative of you didn't really come up with the best game plan here, because statistically you look at this and you do have arguably the best rushing quarterback in the NFL. And this offense really didn't look great. And part of that probably is due to the Chiefs defense and how good they played. But the offense, I was so perplexed sitting there watching this, that this offense struggled the entire game, it looked like. And Lamar Jackson really did not look like Lamar Jackson did in the regular season. It looked like he kind of almost took a year step back. And this is the Lamar Jackson that I had watched in years past. It didn't look like the comfortable and confident Lamar like I had seen throughout the season. That was all out the window in this game. And I think it really showed. And a lot of Ravens fans are pretty upset, and a lot of people are saying it's because Lamar choked and that's the reason they lost. Is there some validation in anything that I said there in a lot of people's beliefs, or do you think it really truly leans more heavily in the Chiefs defense here?
I think the wild thing is they saw the success firsthand with their running. Like they had that fourth and short where they ran quarterback power to the right, and Lamar gets 20 some yards off the run. And then on the very next play, they hand it off to Gus Edwards and it goes for 13. And then that was pretty much it. Then they just kind of stopped doing it. And that was the weirdest thing to me, was they saw it work. Like you literally saw it we were all watching the same game, I thought, and you saw it work. And I thought that was going to kind of be the changing of the tide. I thought they were just going to go and just try to control it. Like, Pat's killing us right now. Let's just control ball control. Like, let's just keep them on the other side. And they didn't. And it was wild to me. It's almost like they reverted back to things they were trying to coach out of Lamar. Like they're trying to emphasize it, where it's like, hey, he's a passer. He can pass it. Let's go ahead and do it. And there were shots downfield. You could see it. They were taking their shots. They just weren't able to connect on them. And it's like, yes, it's there, but is this a limitation of Lamar? Did we see, like, were they forcing him to do things he didn't have to do? Because you look at the game previous to that, they were just like death by a million paper cuts. It was all underneath. They're getting their tight ends. They're doing all that. And the Chiefs just took all the way. They're like, fine, go ahead and beat us deep. Just throw it to Odell. You paid $23 million this year for him. Go throw it to him deep. Go try that. And it didn't happen. It did not happen for him.
And that's what I thought was weird too, is they were gashing them when they did try to run the ball, but they were also getting a lot of yards over the middle when they were throwing the ball to Andrews or Likely over the middle, or even in the flats. Like, it was open for Lamar to take those shots, but for whatever reason, Todd Monken was drawing up, or I don't know if it was Lamar or Monken, but they were just taking deep shots. And I understand that's probably what the Chiefs were giving them, but still, if you watched the Houston game a couple weeks ago, Lamar settled down in the second half by just easy short throws over the middle to his tight end, to Zay Flowers, getting the ball to these guys in space and letting them go to work. But for some reason, they wanted to just chuck it. And I think this game was over as soon as the Chiefs went up 14-0 in the second quarter, because the play calling went out the window at that point. And we saw that with Todd Monken, who's a first-time play caller in the NFL. He just kind of panicked. He went away from the game script. And if you watch a guy who has experience like Shanahan and for the 49ers, he didn't give up on the run in the second half when they were down by 17. Baltimore didn't run the ball at all in the second half, and they were still in the game. Baltimore should have won this game, but they ultimately just shot themselves in the foot too many times with stupid penalties, stupid play calling, and too many turnovers on offense.
Well, do we want to continue the conversation of stupid play calling and pivot over to the 49ers Lions? The Dan Campbell talk to conclude the Dan Campbell talk. it's about time we had this conversation. We had it last week to a degree. There was a lot of emotion and a lot of there was a lot of emotion. There was a lot of emotion from both parties. It was being thrown around by both Scotty and myself. Scotty, you were right. You were 100% right. I think for me, it's never that I disagreed with the rationale. I think you were always too early. Was kind of where I was at, and maybe it paid off to be too early because you received a lot of hate. You received a lot of hate over on the Twitterverse when a graphic came out previous to this game criticizing Dan Campbell and his coaching decisions. It was never that I disagreed with the coaching decisions. It was more so that I disagreed with you and still disagree with you as far as Dan Campbell getting them to that point. I agreed with you and still agree with you that his coaching decisions need some improvement. And I think this game was a very showing moment in that way where Dan Campbell really did shoot the Lions in the foot.
Let's talk about what part are you talking about specifically? Are we talking about the decision to kick a field goal or not to tie it? Is that what we're circling as the decision?
And that's So that's what's being toted around in the talking heads in the media is Dan Campbell's decision making in this game. He went for it twice on 4th down. He did not convert either of them. The Lions lost by 3, and at one point Dan Campbell could have kicked the field goal or brought the field goal team out there to attempt to kick a field goal. And he didn't do that, and they lost by 3, and they could have had a tie, and they could have continued to play the game and try and win it all. I think there were a lot of things that kind of went awry in this. The Lions had quite a generous lead going into halftime to the point where I got up and was like, this game's over, and I still had it on in the background, but I wasn't paying attention to it as closely because I really did think this game was over. And then I had to tune back in pretty damn quick because the 49ers, they were not done playing football. I think there were a couple things that Dan Campbell did not do correctly. I don't necessarily penalize. I get it. He probably should have kicked a field goal there. But you also look at it like this. If they would have converted on both those 4th downs, we're not sitting here having that conversation, right? So everything that we talk about is in hindsight. That's how this works.
That's kind of true.
Hold on, Matt.
Okay.
Before you get in there, because I know you're going to get.
turn.
I know you're going to get revved up. I want to give you the opportunity to get revved up properly. I want to paint.
You always rev me up, brother.
I want to paint how this decision popped off. I think everything in a vacuum sure does not look great. And I initially thought that this was a stupid move. Now, I don't know how much stock you guys put into the analytics and percentages of outcomes and how people are going to think things are going to shape up. What was happening before they got to this point in time? What was this Lions offense doing? They were turning the ball over. They were dropping balls. There's a lot of things that just kind of weren't shaping up in their favor to maybe get back down to this range again, right? They just weren't executing at a very high level at this point. Now, the analytics says if they went for it on 4th down, they had a 39.1% chance of winning if they went for it. If they kicked it, it was 38%. So there wasn't much of a difference in them winning this game if they went for it or not, because even getting that 1st down wasn't going to indicate that they were even going to win or go up, or they might have had to kick a field goal anyways. And where they were on the field at that distance, the Lions kicker was 50% on the year. So you still only had a 50% chance of even making it. It wasn't like it was a chip shot field goal.
Yeah,
and
the whole kicker thing though is let me just touch on the kicker thing because that's been thrown around a lot. And the reason that his numbers are skewed this season is because they never kick field goals. So if he kicked as many field goals as anybody else, then I think those numbers would average out. And you look at, people talked about his Badgley stats over the course of his career, and they're not great from distance. Okay, but over the last 3 years, he's kicking at, I pulled it up. He's kicking at 83% on 40 yards or more over the last 3 years with a career long of 59 yards. He's perfectly capable of kicking field goals. People are taking stats that are 10 years old and converting it to give Dan Campbell an out.
He had not made one outside since 2020 of that distance.
I don't think that's
outdoors.
True.
He had not made one. Kevin Seifert, ESPN. He had not made one since 2020 of that distance outdoors, and he was 50%.
I closed out my
for his
reference,
career.
so I'll have to defer to you.
I'm just saying, I think Dan Campbell knew he knows he has a kicker problem. I think they're going to address that this offseason, and I'm not going to put that. I think he was doing what he thought was best for his team in that moment to give him the best chance to win. I didn't love the play call. If we want to circle on anything, play call sucked. I don't disagree with the idea of going for it. I disagree with what they were calling. And that's what I would put on Dan is what did I say precluding this is they were not executing at a high level. They were not all on the same page. The wide receivers were struggling to catch passes. They almost had a pick going into that drive because like the wide receiver, was it Williams, fumbled it and almost gave it right to the DB. Like there were things that weren't looking great. Like I wouldn't have called that. I would have been like, hey, I can trust Sam Laporta probably more than anybody right now because he's, he was the most reliable thing for me all season. Let's figure out a way to get it in his hands. If we're going to criticize anything, I think it's maybe just how he chose to go for it on fourth down, not that he went for it on fourth down.
I want to jump in here. I think you still kick the field goal. I think you still kick the field goal. You attempt to take the lead while you're still that far ahead. I don't hate him going for it. I would have preferred a field goal. I don't hate him going for it. I don't love the play call. What I admire about Dan Campbell is this. That has been his mantra all season long, is he's going to go for it. He's going to go for it. He's going to go for it, and he stuck to his guns. What I can't understand is that worked for you in the regular season, right? It worked for you. Obviously, Scotty, you brought some stats last week. Go listen to last episode if you want to listen to all the things that Scotty said about why it didn't work in the games that they lost. But overall, it worked for them. They got to the NFC Championship. That's where they wanted to be. They wanted a shot at the Super Bowl. You can do that in the regular season, and you won't face as much scrutiny because it's game over game, and the implications are not nearly as severe. And you figured out, okay, if we lose this game, it's not the end of the world. We still have a shot to go to the playoffs, whatever, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You can play all these games. You're in the NFC Championship. This is it. If you lose this game, you don't go any further. Your team is done at this point. Okay, so you make it to the NFC Championship. You as a head coach have to do whatever you can to set your team up to succeed in the best way possible. You kicking that field goal is the best way for them to succeed. I loved it during the regular season. It was fun. It was crazy. You never knew what was going to happen. It was cute. It was great. This is it now, right? Get rid of the cute shit. Bring in the rationale, we need to win mentality, and set your team up to give yourself the best chance to succeed as possible. And in this moment, I don't think he did that. And I would have liked to see a field goal kicked. You take the points when you can. You're trying to go to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, and not to mention, to Alan's point, which is, I think, the opposite of what he was trying to say, but the way I interpret what you said, our offense is struggling. Our offense in the first half was lights out, which is why even the first field goal attempt that would have put them up by 3 scores that they didn't take, to me, that was a 48, 49-yarder, far from a gimme. And at that point in time, your offense looked unstoppable. So the first field goal attempt, or the first fourth down conversion that they tried, which inevitably kind of swung the tide, to me, I was okay with that because I understand the situation. But in this situation, you can either try and tie the game now or rely on your offense that now for the last several series has been struggling. Even if you convert it, you still have to continue to march down the field and get in the end zone. So to me, you look at your team now is struggling. Why are you not taking the points when you can? That's why that decision to me doesn't make any sense at all.
Yeah.
And I would argue that the first fourth down attempt that he went for was worse than the second attempt. I understand the second attempt, but the first attempt to get points, to go up 17 points to open up the second half, you put your team in a great position, obviously up 3 possessions at that point. You're also controlling the ball. You're doing great. But also, if their kicker had made the field goal at that point, we might be having a different discussion towards the end of the game of, okay, he made the kick from the same distance. Why wouldn't Dan Campbell go for the field goal late when the kicker just made one from the same distance earlier in the game? So I think the first one is not getting talked about enough. We're talking about the second one, but I think the second one was fine just with where they were in the game, the ebbs and the flow of the game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think what I was getting at was, what's the likelihood you're going to get back down there again to get points? And I'm okay with it if you're trying to get the most you can out of it, because a field goal just ties it. You still have to play defense. Then you have to go back down there and try to win it again in hopes that it even gets to overtime. I'm okay with going for the win. They were, during the regular season, they were 75% at converting 4th and 3 or fewer. So they had a 75% chance statistically based on how they had played over the course of that year. And Michael was it Badgley? I don't even know how to say it.
Badgley.
It's
Badgley.
Yeah.
He was 9 of 20 in his career from 48 yards or more, and that was 45%. So statistically, I get it. It's easy to point at that. That's how you got there. That's like the Warriors not shooting threes in the NBA Finals. Like, no, that's how you got there. You shot your threes, shoot them. And I think they can live with that. I think if you're a Lions fan, the thing you got to look at is everybody wants to say, I love it. They always say, I'll be back. We'll be back next year. We'll be doing that. And it's like, statistically, you're fucking not.
No, and I
especially when
it's
you're
funny.
losing your play caller.
Well, yeah, like there's a lot of things. I actually sent out a tweet on my account today about this. And Dan Campbell had even come out at the press conference, and he told his team, he goes, it's going to be a lot harder if we want to come back and do this again, because he also recognizes how difficult it is. Not only is Ben Johnson, one of your play callers, potentially going to be gone, but there are also other things to think about. The NFL is going to create a much more difficult schedule for you. Your schedule is going to intrinsically be harder because you've shown that you are a team worth competing. So we want to squeeze as much money out of that as we can and make your schedule much more difficult. So that is one thing to think about. They also have free agents that are going to leave. So how does that impact the team? Bringing on new people, what does that do to the locker room? There are so many extra things that go on to make it to where they are now, and it's going to be harder. Like it will be for any team, because you look at the Chiefs schedule. Once Patrick Mahomes, I don't know it intrinsically, but if you look at the first year that Patrick Mahomes took the Chiefs all the way and became somebody, their schedule has probably gotten more difficult as time has progressed, because they want the Chiefs, they want to showcase those tough games and highlight a Monday Night Football game or a primetime game for them. So they can showcase that, because that's how they're going to make money too.
That's the NFL parity. Once you win your division and you're first, you play a first place schedule. Like you play the other first place teams, around the league. That's why they want that parity, and so that's why when teams have like a magical year, that it's like, yeah, now your players are more expensive.
Now it's harder. Yeah.
Now it's harder. Your coaches are more sought after. It's tough to keep reinventing yourself when you have.
Look at the Eagles this past year.
Yeah.
They won the
Right.
NFC East last year, and then they face all the 1 seeds this year, and they folded.
They struggle. Yeah.
Well, they made it halfway through that really tough stretch before they fell apart, to be fair. They beat some good teams. Okay, so before we move on, this has become a tradition now. I'm going to do one last Dan Campbell quick rant. It's going to take 2 minutes, and then I'm going to say something positive about Dan Campbell and about the Lions, about their future, because I do think that there is a positive outlook here. So despite what we've talked about, it is my opinion that Dan Campbell made a series of bad decisions. We didn't even talk about clock management to end that game, to even give them enough time to have a chance, which they ran a running play and then called a timeout instead of kicking a field goal right away. So the list is actually pretty long in this game.
Sounds like you just talked about it.
Yeah, I did. I just talked about it. But, okay, and to be fair to the Lions, they obviously had a lot of bad things happen to them in this game, with drops and the Ayuk fluke where he caught a ball off the face mask, right? There were a lot of things that happened.
That was fucking cool.
It was amazing.
That was awesome.
Yeah, it was amazing.
That was football.
Real quick, here's the real question. Was that play cooler than Lamar catching his own pass?
No, that was the coolest play I've seen all year.
So.
That was
so badass.
You know how many times that's happened to the Chiefs? Like, infamously, where a player caught his own pass or caught his own fumble, and it turned out negatively for the Chiefs. There was some PTSD involved on that play if you've watched Chiefs games over the years, because Mariota very famously had a ball batted in the air and caught it and scored a touchdown off of it.
Okay, let me ask you this. I don't want to derail this, but was Lamar Jackson catching his own throw and then running 15 yards with it cooler or less cool than Will Levis throwing a pick and then hitting the guy and making him fumble,
stealing the ball back?
Which one was cooler? I think I'm going to take Will Levis.
Probably.
You don't see a quarterback just be like, fuck, I screwed up, and then he just ran in the pile and just smashed him and took the ball back.
Lamar's involved a hefty amount of luck for the ball to be in a catchable position after it's been batted down, whereas Will Levis was just like, fuck you. He's
just all grit, baby.
Yeah, there's that video of Ayuk, though, where he was pissed that his play was number 2 behind Lamar's. Yeah. So I had to ask. Yeah. Go ahead.
Continue the rant. Go ahead.
Game on the rant.
Okay. Well, with that said, obviously a lot of bad stuff happened to make this game tighter. But once the game got tight and the Lions had to rely on Dan Campbell's play calling, this outcome is maybe the most predictable outcome in all of sports history. And the reason it's predictable, and if you've listened to the podcast for the last month, but it happened in week 2, it happened in week 7, it happened in week 12, it happened in week 17. The Lions win games when Dan Campbell doesn't actively sabotage his own team on the field. And that's been the story of the Lions all season long. When Dan Campbell calls a good game, which he has, he's called many games without any mistakes, they win. And when he messes up a lot, they lose. And that's just the way it's been. So predictable problems are often preventable problems, as you might imagine. Had Dan seen any scrutiny at all from any of the Detroit media or any of the national media about involving these bad play calls throughout the season, is it totally unimaginable that maybe he would have matured a little bit in these play calls and maybe been a little bit more calculated, a little bit less emotional, and made play calls based on the situation and less about his feelings about momentum or whatever it might be? I think that's perfectly reasonable to assume. If he was getting the scrutiny that he had earned throughout the season, then they might not be in the situation, and they might, instead of heading home, they might be going to a Super Bowl right now. But nobody was allowed to criticize him back then. You say one negative thing about Dan Campbell, as I've learned, you get 50,000 Lions fans in your DMs and in your mentions calling you an idiot.
Hilarious.
And, yeah, which, it is. Fans are fans. I respect it. But it is what it is. I mean, he didn't get the scrutiny that he deserved, and then he made the same mistakes all the way through the season, and eventually it ended their season. And I think that's important to point out that, hey, maybe it doesn't make sense to me, especially as a Chiefs fan. As a Chiefs fan, when Andy Reid gets too cute, I'm the first one to yell at him. When we keep playing Kadarius Toney, despite the fact we keep playing Kadarius Toney, despite the fact that he's
don't. You
the one where they spun around
because it worked. But yeah, see, exactly, that was sick because it worked. And I think that's really the entire narrative, is it just wasn't working for Dan Campbell.
No, that's not the narrative, because if you hit on 18, sometimes you're going to get a 3, but it's still a stupid decision no matter what. And Dan Campbell's had a lot of those. He's had a lot of fine decisions. You got to remember, he went for it on 4th down 40 times throughout the season. I only had a problem with 14 of them. You can still be aggressive and not be an idiot. And that's just the way that it is.
Problem with 14 of them. Yeti, we need a graphic for that.
Yeah,
but anyway, so the vast majority of his calls on 4th down this season were acceptable to me. And I think they're obviously risk going for it on 4th down, but I think they made sense in those moments. He's just got to cut out the stupid ones. And this is a lesson for everybody. And Detroit Lions fans, you need to listen closely here, whether you're talking about a football coach, or you're talking about a CEO, or you're talking about your local politician. Right? When these guys walk into a room and they get nothing but cheers from the clapping seals in the audience who won't utter one single sentence of criticism, then the problems that they inevitably have, because nobody's perfect, don't get fixed. And that's the reason they're not going to the Super Bowl today. So just be aware. Don't be afraid to criticize your favorite guy. It's okay. It's okay to criticize your favorite guy when they mess up. That's fine. Now, for the positive things here, as I've said for the last month, Dan Campbell, the reason
you
Dan
said 2 minutes. You're on like 7 minutes.
Well, you guys interrupted me for 3 minutes. I got some extra time.
I can't wait for you and Dan Campbell to angry bang at some point. Just totally just feverishly go
as much
at each
shit as
other.
I talked about him, he would break me in half with his hands or his whatever else we're banging with. But anyway,
still had sex.
Dan Campbell. Part of his problem, he's been kind of let down by the media and by his fan base that refused to criticize him. Now in this moment, with these key mistakes in this big game, I think he has no choice but to learn from these mistakes, which means that Dan Campbell next year, this might be the last time I ever have to talk about him. If he comes back and he's still risky, but he's more measured and more calculated, he's still got a chance to be a good coach or even a very good or great coach. And he's just got to fix these problems. He didn't have the opportunity to do that before because nobody was pointing it out. But now that everyone is talking about it, thanks for getting on the bandwagon, guys. Now that everyone's talking about it, he has an opportunity to fix those problems. Detroit has a great young roster. They've got a lot of hurdles to jump over, but they've got a great young roster, and Dan Campbell obviously garners the love of his team. He could very well be a good coach for the future. So Detroit fans, you've got a lot to be happy about. A lot of hurdles, but a lot to be happy about. And I ultimately think Dan Campbell is going to be a better coach after this experience.
I am so sad that the Lions didn't make it and get to play the Chiefs, because that would be the only.
It would have been the best. That would have been the solution.
The biggest gift
of
the
Chiefs
the solution. Losing
the inevitable
the
solution.
Super Bowl would be to the Lions and Dan Campbell. I would have been totally okay with it. I would have been like, this off season's going to
Would've been-
be amazing.
That was the Super Bowl I was hoping for. I
wanted
was
that really bad.
praying for the Lions Chiefs Super Bowl.
I wanted it
Yeah.
really bad.
None of my
didn't
friends support me, is what I'm getting from this.
No,
Okay.
I support you.
Scotty, I think
just-
you're
there's
pointing.
there's so
you're-
much passion for just a coach.
I think that
Now,
game.
Okay, this needs to stop because I'm not coming out of the blue with this bullshit. I have been inundated with Dan Campbell sycophants every day for the last 17 weeks. Yeah,
That's good verbiage.
I am responding to the overwhelming, ridiculous media that's been forced down my throat for the entire season.
You just got to
Scotty,
ignore it.
you're starting to fill me up with hate, and I think I want to put my hate towards Ben Johnson. You know why, Scotty?
Yeah, get him.
Do it.
Because Ben Johnson fucked the Lions second half. If we're being honest,
Why,
watch-
Yeti? Why did Ben Johnson fuck the Lions?
You want to know
Lot of
why?
sucks.
Slack?
I
Let's
wanna
get on
know.
this train. Get on
All
this
Everybody's
right.
having
train.
sex. No,
All
Ben's
right,
having
so,
sex.
Yeah.
Ben's not having sex.
So in the first half, the Lions ran the ball 21 times for 148 yards and 3 touchdowns. Life was great, right? They were up 17 going into halftime. Life was great. In the second half, they ran the ball 8 times for 34 yards. What the fuck are you doing out there, man? Like, you are completely dominating the game with your offensive line. You are getting over 5 yards a carry, and you completely go away from the game plan in the second half, and you give the ball straight to the 49ers, and they go back to the 49ers, and they just outgain you on the ground in the second half. This is the case of an offensive coordinator that is too young, and he's trying to get way too cute in the postseason and not sticking to your guns. And we saw that with Todd Monken versus Kansas City as well. They forget who they are when it gets into these pressure situations, and hopefully he learns from it. But my God, it was a costly mistake.
Dude, playoff pressure. He panicked. He panicked as soon as they fumbled that one handoff, and then it started going downhill. He panicked, and he wanted to try to score quick. He wanted to get the ball down the field and score. He panicked.
Yep.
When you watch this game, like, are we done with the Dan Campbell shit? Can we move on?
Let's move on.
So you watch this game. You watch the very beginning of the game, and I was very like I mean, obviously, I think most people kind of were like, "Oh, the Lions are going to win this game." The 49ers defense looks absolutely depleted, and the Lions are just playing good smash mouth ball. Like David Montgomery to the left ISO. You have an outside sweep on Gibbs. Like, they were running the ball, and they were running the ball very, very effectively. And I'm sitting here watching this 49ers defense, and I'm like, you have no answers. Like, and that was really a lot of the first half was like, you have no answers right now. The Lions are doing whatever they want to you on offense. Why? I think you bring up a very valid point, Yeti. They were running the ball effectively, which really opened up their entire playbook to be able to do other things. I think Ben Johnson did panic. And Scotty, you give a lot of hate to Dan Campbell, and a lot of people have made this a Dan Campbell conversation, right? The Lions winning and losing, and Dan Campbell has been the talk of the media. We're not talking about Jared Goff and how he did. We're not talking about the drops that some of these wide receivers and these positional players dropped.
Well,
We're talking about Dan Campbell.
For the record.
I think it's because the city, and I look at it, as a viewer from the outside in, the Lions needed a person to put their belief in. They needed a person, and they couldn't do it with their quarterback because Jared Goff was kind of unproven, and Dan Campbell is their head coach and their leader and all those things. But I think there is fair share of scrutiny to go around between both the offensive and defensive coordinators here, because Dan Campbell, while he does make some of these calls that we previously discussed, Getty brings up a really valid point. Like, what happened here? Why did you go away from the method that was working for you to continue to dominate the 49ers, and you kind of just let up on it? And that's, I think that is really vindictive of how the game ended up going for the Lions.
Well, when you blow a 17-point lead, the largest in NFC Championship history, a lot of things have to go wrong, and a lot of people have to fuck up. And that's what we saw. I mean, at the end of the day, that's what we saw. But, let's flip the script here and talk about the 49ers a little bit. My initial takeaway from this game was, and especially in the first half, and Detroit's offense is one of the best in the league. They're very good. But, wow, the 49ers defense was pathetic. Like, I was just watching it, and they were literally Sam Laporta, who has been amazing all season and one of the key weapons, was catching a ball, and there's not a guy within 10 yards of him. Like, it was blown coverage after blown coverage, and I think it's because they were getting destroyed on the line of scrimmage, so they didn't know what to do. They were getting the ball run down their throat, and the key pass catchers were making plays with no defender in sight. It was just absolutely pathetic. I actually started this game saying, okay, as a Chiefs fan, I think the Lions are the more beatable team. And then after the first 2 quarters, I said, holy shit, I think Patrick Mahomes might throw for 700 yards against this 49ers defense. It was that bad. I just couldn't believe how pitiful it was.
It was pretty bad. I have one last question, and then I think I'm wrapped up for this. Brock Purdy, Mr. Irrelevant, is he deserving of his time here in the NFL as an MVP candidate? I know he is an MVP candidate, and he was kind of lower on the list. Are we ready to just finally shelf the conversation of, is Brock Purdy legit? Can we shelf that, or do we still have concerns? I'm curious to know your guys' thoughts and opinions on this. Is Brock Purdy a legit good quarterback, or are we still riding the narrative that the media has kind of spewed all year of he's just surrounded by good athletes?
I think we can officially say Big Cock Brock is a good quarterback. And the reason why is the past 2 games, we have seen him come into his own as a good NFL quarterback. He has taken the 49ers offense and he has put up points in the second half when they needed him to do something. Last week against Green Bay, or 2 weeks against Green Bay, he had a slow start in the first half, came on in the second half. Same situation with Detroit, and he's out there running the ball. He's not just being a game manager. He is on the run and making these crazy throws. He's got my respect as a good quarterback. He's not a game manager. He is a good NFL quarterback.
Brock Purdy did something in one half of football that no QB has done in the last 30 years, and that is throw for over 150 yards, rush for over 45 yards, complete 80% of his passes, and average more than 10 yards a rush while having no turnovers. I mean, that was it. If you look at some of those plays that were drawn up, like they were dead in the water. He bailed them out. Like he kept it moving. He bailed them out. Like they had the momentum. Obviously, like it's easier to score on the short field. But man, I think that was quite the game from him. If I'm being honest, a little scary going into the Super Bowl.
You guys say he's legit, and you guys say that he's here to stay, and you guys say that he is a good quarterback. Let me propose a couple thoughts to you guys. If you were starting a franchise as an NFL, would you rather have Purdy or Jordan Love?
Because look at their contract situations. That'll give you my answer every time.
You mean dollar amounts equal?
Dollar amounts equal. You get them both for the same amount of time. All the other ancillary BS that you guys are going to try and dance around and not answer the question. Which one do you take? Jordan Love or Brock Purdy?
Am I playing in California or Green Bay?
You're playing in Germany.
I would say just eye test. I'm not even going off anything. I'm just what my eyes tell me. I would take Love.
Okay.
I think I would take Love too, not because of eye test, but because I think he's been able to do a lot with not a lot. Where he's obviously got great weapons around him, but everybody's young.
But that's the conversation that people are having with Brock Purdy, and that's the
two
flip
things
side
can be
of it.
true at once. Just because Brock Purdy has a lot of weapons doesn't mean he's automatically a system quarterback, but it does give him certain advantages that other quarterbacks don't have, that have to fight through and get success in spite of not having Christian McCaffrey and Brandon Ayuk.
Every
and Deebo
quarterback.
Samuel. Yeah,
Every quarterback goes through it.
Right. So I think Jordan Love has done a lot more with young receivers who aren't as familiar with the NFL speed, and they've had a lot of success, especially through the second half of the season. I think Jordan Love would probably get it. But Brock Purdy is very clearly a very capable quarterback who is a playmaker. I mean, people call him a system quarterback, and because he's in the 49er system, you kind of are by default. There's a lot of just handing the ball to Christian McCaffrey and swing passes, but he's also made plays when they needed to make plays. He made a couple throws that are just impossible to make, and he's a playmaker, no doubt about it.
Yeah, you taking Love or Purdy?
I'm taking Purdy. I think Love is a sexy pick right now just because of what we saw from him in the postseason. But now I've seen Brock Purdy for a season and a half win games. I don't care what the narrative is around him. He just wins games. He finds a way to get it done, whether it's with his legs or with his arms. He is everything that I would want in a franchise quarterback. Just go out there, play mistake-free football, and give us a chance to win the game. And that's what he does every week for the 49ers. That's why they're in the Super Bowl.
Okay. That's all I got, gentlemen.
Who are you taking?
I want to say Jordan Love. You
can say what you want.
I know, and I think I will say Jordan Love. I would take Jordan Love over Brock Purdy. I think Jordan Love has a better arm. I think Jordan Love's drop back is beautiful. I love watching him throw the ball, and I think he learned that from Aaron Rodgers, and it looks good. So I think he's got better arm strength than Purdy. But I think Purdy's poise is what makes me like kind of gravitate to want to take him. Is he never seems flustered. He never seems off balance. He always seems like he's very level-headed throughout whatever situation he's thrown in, and I admire that because not a lot of quarterbacks have that, and I do think that is something that makes Purdy great, is his ability to not get flustered and not get frustrated, and he's very analytical in what he does, where it's like, okay, we made a mistake, I'm going to go to the sideline, we're going to figure out what I did wrong, or we're going to figure out what I need to do better, and we're going to go out and do that. And you know, I think this game is really a great game to showcase that. Is he was faced with adversity. It was shit or get off the pot moment for the 49ers, and they were facing a large deficit, and he didn't get flustered. He didn't, think I have to play hero ball to try and get the 49ers to win this game. I need to go out there. I need to execute and do my job like I've been expected to do all season long. And if I can do that, we might have a chance to win this thing. And that's what they saw. So I admire Brock Purdy. And I do think he is here to. I think he is a good quarterback. I don't want to take anything away from him, but I still think I'd rather take Jordan Love just based off the athletic side of things. I think Love is a better raw talent than Purdy is.
And Purdy always has that thing nagging behind him, which is Jimmy G got to a Super Bowl with the same group.
That sucks because I think Jimmy G's a fucking. I think he's terrible.
There's no doubt Brock Purdy's made a lot of plays, but the on-field success, you do have to chalk up to some degree the fact that this 49ers team is stacked on offense, and that's just the way it is. And it's not to take away from his skill set, but when you look at on-field success, that is a factor that has to be put into it.
Sure. All right, gentlemen, let's get the hell out of here. It is time to go. Want to say thank you to all you Brainiacs out there that have watched us or listened to us on a podcast platform. Just hit the subscribe button, man. Whether you're on Spotify, we're on YouTube, wherever you're at, hit the subscribe button because it does mean the world. We appreciate it. We
are
out.
If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you tune into our new releases every week on your favorite podcast app. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and check out LeatherBrainz.com for all of your fantasy football needs. And remember, Brainiacs, a championship should be more than a fantasy.